The host smiled into the camera and said it lightly, almost playfully, that perhaps Brigitte Bardot's success had more to do with what audiences saw than what she could actually do. The studio laughed politely. The red broadcast light burned steady. 2 million viewers were watching. Bardot didn't smile back. She didn't interrupt. She didn't look away. The microphone hung between them, live and unforgiving. The host shifted in his chair, expecting a clever deflection. Instead, she held his gaze. The room began to understand that something had just changed and that he would have to say it again. What happens when a woman refuses to accept the script written for her? When the person holding the microphone suddenly realizes they're no longer in control, when a public dismissal becomes something else entirely, and everyone is watching. If you're fascinated by moments when power shifts in real time, subscribe and hit the bell icon for more stories like this. This is a fictionalized reconstruction inspired by Brigitte Bardot's career era and the social dynamics of 1960s French media. It is not a factual account of any specific documented event. All secondary characters are fictional. By 1965, Brigitte Bardot had become one of the most photographed women in Europe. Her face sold magazines. Her name filled theaters, but the narrative around her remained fixed: beauty without depth, appeal without intelligence. Interviewers asked about her hair, her clothes, her relationships. They rarely asked about her choices as an actress, her contract negotiations, or the 18-hour days she spent on set. The assumption was simple: she was there to be looked at, not listened to. The interview had been arranged through her publicist as part of a promotional tour for her latest film. The host was a known figure in French television, respected for his political interviews, his questions sharp and direct when speaking with ministers or intellectuals. The studio was prestigious. The show broadcast live to 2 million households. Bardot's team had been assured it would be a serious conversation. She had prepared notes. She had worn a simple dress, minimal jewelry. She had arrived on time. The first 10 minutes had gone smoothly. The host asked about the film's production schedule, the director's vision, the location shooting in Normandy. Then his tone shifted. The questions became observations. Comments about her appearance, her effect on men, the natural gift she possessed. Each phrased as a compliment, each reducing her work to something she hadn't earned. And then came the final statement, delivered with a knowing smile, that her success was less about talent and more about what audiences saw when they looked at her. The host was 43, a veteran of live television, comfortable in the spotlight. He had interviewed ministers, authors, scientists. He controlled the format, the timing, the flow. His questions were designed to entertain the audience, not necessarily to serve the guest. He knew how to guide a conversation, when to press, when to move on. His confidence came from repetition. He had done this hundreds of times. The set was his territory. The microphone was his tool. The cameras followed his lead. He saw Bardot the way most of his colleagues did, as spectacle, not subject. She was there to add color to the broadcast, to be charming, to deflect his comments with grace or humor. The expectation was clear: she would smile, offer a witty response, and the show would continue. That was the unspoken agreement. Female guests, especially actresses, played their part. They didn't challenge the premise. They certainly didn't stop the momentum of a live broadcast to make a point. The studio itself reinforced this dynamic. The host's chair sat slightly elevated. The lighting favored him, casting her in softer focus. His producer controlled the camera angles, deciding what viewers saw and when. The audience had come to see him perform. Bardot was the occasion, but he was the event. Everything about the space, the placement of the furniture, the position of the cameras, the proximity of the crew, reinforced who held authority here. And it wasn't her. She didn't respond immediately. Instead, she tilted her head slightly, her gaze steady on the host's face. The pause stretched past, comfortable. A cameraman shifted his weight behind camera one, the rubber sole of his shoe squeaking faintly against the floor. The host's hand, which had been gesturing, came to rest on the armrest of his chair. Someone in the control booth leaned forward, visible through the glass, watching. The room went quiet. Not the natural quiet between questions, but something denser. The makeup artist stopped moving, brush still in hand. The producer's assistant, who had been walking toward the booth with a clipboard, froze mid-step. The host's smile remained fixed, but his fingers tapped once more against the chair, a small tell. Bardot's hands stayed folded in her lap, her posture unchanged. The red camera light didn't blink. Then she spoke, her voice calm, almost curious. "Would you mind repeating that question?" The microphone between them picked up every syllable. The host's eyebrows lifted slightly. He opened his mouth, then closed it. A journalist in the third row of the audience leaned forward, pen poised above a notepad. The stagehand who had been adjusting the light stand stopped moving entirely, his hand still on the metal pole. All eyes turned, not toward the host, but toward her. The shift was visible. Camera operators looked up from their viewfinders. The producer's assistant completed her step and turned back toward the set. The audience members adjusted in their seats. The host cleared his throat softly. His script sat on his lap, pages slightly creased where his fingers had gripped them. He glanced down at it, then back up. "I don't think that's necessary," he said, his tone lighter now, attempting to move forward. Bardot didn't move. "I'd like to hear it again," she said, "exactly as you said it." Her expression remained neutral, not angry, not defensive, simply attentive. The host's hand tightened around the script. A bead of sweat appeared at his hairline, caught briefly by the studio lights. Behind him, the producer stood up in the booth, his silhouette visible through the glass. The cameraman on camera too zoomed in slightly, a barely audible mechanical adjustment. No one moved. The makeup artist's hand lowered, brush now at her side. The journalist's pen remained hovering above the page, not writing. The stagehand by the light stand appeared to be holding his breath, his shoulders rigid. The host looked toward the producer's booth, a quick glance, searching for guidance. The producer's face was impossible to read through the glass. The host's jaw worked silently, as if testing words before speaking them. The silence thickened. Somewhere in the back of the studio, a ventilation system hummed, suddenly audible. The host's fingers released the script, and it slid slightly on his lap, pages rustling. He reached for his water glass on the small table beside his chair, lifted it, then set it back down without drinking. The condensation on the glass caught the light. Bardot's breathing was steady, visible in the slight rise and fall of her shoulders. She waited. The microphone stood between them, black foam windscreen perfectly still. The cable connecting it to the sound system traced a path across the floor toward the control booth, where the audio engineer had removed his headphones, hanging them around his neck as he watched the set. The host's producer sat back down slowly, clipboard now pressed flat against the console. In the audience, programs remained folded. No one coughed, no one whispered. The cameras continued recording. The host's face shifted, color rising slightly, his confident smile now resembling something closer to a grimace. He picked up the script again, gripping it with both hands. Bardot's gaze never left his face. Her hands remained folded. The fabric of her dress hadn't moved. The journalist in the third row finally lowered his pen to the page but didn't write. The stagehand by the light stand swallowed visibly, his throat contracting. The red camera light burned steady, absolute stillness. The host's shoulders lowered slightly, a visible deflation. His fingers whitened against the script. Every person in the studio seemed to understand what came next, that he would have to repeat it, on air with cameras rolling and 2 million people listening, that she had just transformed his casual dismissal into a statement requiring defense. The producer in the booth leaned forward again, one hand raised as if to signal something, then lowered it. The host took a breath, audible in the microphone. Time felt suspended, held in the space between her question and his inevitable response. The host shifted in his chair, sitting more upright. He brought the microphone slightly closer, his hand trembling almost imperceptibly against the stand. "I said," he began, his voice tighter now, stripped of its earlier casualness, "that your success seems to come more from your appearance than from technical skill." The words landed differently this time, no longer a passing comment, but a statement he was being forced to defend. His eyes dropped to the script in his lap, then lifted again. Bardot nodded slowly. "Once, thank you for clarifying," she said. Then she paused, letting the silence return for just 3 seconds. "I've been acting for 12 years. I've worked with 7 directors. I've completed 24 films." Her voice remained even, each fact delivered without emphasis, but the camera caught the shift in her posture, shoulders back, chin level. The microphone picked up everything. "If you believe that is only appearance, perhaps we should discuss what you consider to be skill." The host's face went blank. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. The script slipped from his fingers onto his lap, pages separating. Behind him, the producer stood again in the booth, both hands now pressed against the glass. A cameraman pulled back his zoom, widening the frame to capture both of them. The journalist in the third row wrote rapidly now, pen moving across the page in quick strokes. The makeup artist took a step closer to the set, her expression alert, witnessing. The host tried to laugh, a forced sound that died in the microphone. "I didn't mean," he started, then stopped. Bardot waited, her hands still folded, her expression unchanged. The power had inverted completely. He was the one explaining now, stumbling, while she sat composed, in control, the cameras documenting every second. The stagehand by the light stand lowered his hand from the metal pole. The audience members sat frozen, programs forgotten. The red light stayed on. No one in the studio spoke. The host reached for his water glass again, this time lifting it to his lips, drinking quickly, his throat working as he swallowed. When he set it down, the glass clicked against the table, the sound sharp in the silence. The producer remained standing in the booth, his hand now covering his mouth. The cameramen stayed focused on the set, their equipment still recording. Bardot's expression hadn't changed. She simply sat there waiting for what came next, offering nothing to rescue him. The journalist in the third row stopped writing and looked up, watching the host directly. The makeup artist shifted her weight, brush now hanging loose in her hand. Someone in the audience cleared their throat softly, a single tentative sound that disappeared immediately. The host's fingers drummed once against the armrest, then stopped. He glanced at his script, pages now scattered on his lap, but didn't reach for them. The ventilation system continued humming. The microphone stood untouched between them. The host straightened slightly, attempting to recover, and gestured toward the script without picking it up. "We should move to the next segment," he said, his voice steadier now but lacking its earlier authority. The producer in the booth nodded, then spoke into his headset, inaudible through the glass, but visible in the movement of his jaw. A cameraman adjusted his position, swinging camera 3 toward a different angle. The makeup artist stepped forward, approaching Bardot first rather than the host, powder brush ready. The stagehand finally moved away from the light stand, walking slowly toward the rear of the studio. Bardot uncrossed and recrossed her legs, a minimal shift that nonetheless signaled the moment had passed. The host picked up his script, hands more careful now, and shuffled the pages back into order. The audience remained quiet, programs still folded, but several people exchanged glances. The journalist in the third row closed his notepad deliberately, sliding it into his jacket pocket. The red camera light blinked off on camera 2, then on again. The producer sat back down in the booth. The interview continued, but something fundamental had changed, visible in the host's posture, in the way the crew now looked at Bardot, in the careful distance he maintained from casual dismissals for the remaining 20 minutes. She had spoken, and the room had listened.